Over the past 3 months, some very weird and frankly terrifying things have happened to me. I am writing this diary, or log, of events tonight for fear that after I do what I plan to do, I may never come home. I want this to be proof, or maybe some clue, to what has happened to me if someone finds this. I didn't make it back, and you are reading this right now, wondering where I am. Please, for your own good, do not come looking for me. But before I get ahead of myself, I should start at the beginning, where my life took an eventful and horrifying turn for the worst. Entry 1. A Stroll in the Woods. Hello, my name is Cameron, and I'm an insomniac. I have been for as long as I can remember. In the grand scheme of things, it is horrible. It really is, but I do enjoy some things. I like to try my best to see the silver lining, for instance, my nighttime walks in the woods near my house. I live in the Highlands in Scotland in a small town called Aviemore. It has a population of just over 3,000 and is smack bang in the middle of nowhere, although it's very popular for tourists and skiing holidays. There isn't much, but it is nice and quiet and I love it, especially the dark nights. I love looking at the sky and being able to see everything clearly, and of course the aurora borealis is very frequent this far north. Most nights when I can't sleep, I like to go out and walk. I live in the more northern area of the town, so literally 5 to 10 minutes walk from my front porch is seemingly endless forestry and fields, as far as the eye can see. It's always so peaceful and relaxing. So, about 15 or 20 minute walk from my house, there is a caravan and camping park called Oakwood. Sometimes I make the 3 to 4 minute drive and park there instead, so I can miss out on the town part of the walk, just in case I run into anyone. I like my walks to be lonely. I don't have the time or the inclination to talk to a drunk neighbor returning home from the local pub. That being said, this is where my current favorite trail begins. It's not a long walk. It really could be done keeping to the trails in about 25 minutes. But I like to wander in and out of the tree line and through some of the thick wood. It usually takes me about 45 minutes as I take in the surroundings, the calm of the forest, the rustling of the gentle breeze through the leaves, the moonlight bobbing in and out of sight as it dances through the treetops to light the way for me. And sometimes those gaps in the trees give way to some of the most incredible greens and purples and reds gliding across the sky so elegantly, like the brush of an artist painting the most incredible scenery in the night sky. The trail then opens out and ends at a beautiful little lake called Avie Lochen. I love to sit on the bank and watch the light from the sky roll across the surface of the lake and listen to the water gently tumbling into the shore while I just sit in peace and collect my thoughts. Usually, I'll sit there for maybe an hour. Sometimes I'll walk around the lake and skip stones or just lie on the cool, soft grass and stare back in time at the stars and galaxies that fill the night. Before heading back the way I came, I don't do this every night. There are other great trails too, and other things I like to do with my spare nights when I can't get much sleep. I have many stories to share, but for this entry, I'd like to tell you about something that happened on the very walk I love so much. This is where it all started. Usually, between around 1 to 2 a.m. I wake up. The first thing I notice is that it's pitch black outside. Then, how quiet everything is, or isn't, depending on the weather. Then I turn to check the time on my phone, knowing exactly what to expect, but ever hopeful that one day it will just say 5:33 a.m. or 6:21 a.m. Any slightly more normal time to wake up. I awoke, looked out the window. It was quiet this night, dark. Early winter, so dark and a little cold, but not more than I could handle on a daily basis. I checked my phone, 1:08 a.m. I lay under the covers with my eyes closed for about 20 minutes, failing miserably at getting back to sleep. At this point, I had begun to hear a slow whispering breeze on the other side of my window. It was so calming and inviting. I knew I was walking tonight. I quickly sat up and began picking up my clothes off the floor and got dressed. I walked down my hallway and opened the door. I shut it again instantly. A jacket. It was colder than I had expected. I walked to the back of my hallway and got my big hiking jacket. It was a warm one. I stuck a beanie hat on and made my way into my garden. It was a nice fresh night. The moon was bright over me, and a slow icy breeze caressed my cheeks. I hopped in my car and backed out of the drive. The streets seemed to be dead, but I wasn't going to chance it. I've come across people before, and it always somewhat spoils the atmosphere. A drunken neighbor or friend on the way home, talking crap for 30 minutes while I politely stand and listen, secretly regretting ever leaving the house. No, tonight I would drive. I drove up to the entrance of Oakwood and parked my car. I took some cigarettes, a lighter, my phone, and a bottle of water. There was a small serrated sports knife in the car, but I've never actually taken it with me before. I've never had to, and tonight was no exception. As I got out of the car, I felt that fresh air hit my lungs. There were a few voices coming from the camping area, but they would be out of earshot soon enough. Aside from that, the only noise was the breeze rustling the bushes and trees. Since I can't park inside the grounds, and the best trail actually sets off from inside the park, you can park up near the entrance and walk through. From here, you walk north and come across a trail and set off up there. You are immediately flanked by woods on both sides as you leave the campground, and it is this trail that leads directly to the lake. The trees are not very thick near the beginning, so around the first 5 minutes into the walk, I normally stick to the trail, nothing out of the ordinary. There is actually quite a lot to explore around this part. There are a number of little clearances in the thick parts of the woods. I actually had to find them on Google Maps because you can't see from the trail. There are very few little paths leading to them. I like to approach them as the wood gets thicker and the sky disappears, then burst through the tree line and be bathed in moonlight. The sky seems so small when you look up from it in the middle of a clearance in the woods. It's something you really have to experience for yourself. The best ones are in the woods to the left. To the right, there's actually not much, and it's only a short distance through to a road, although I still wander that way too. Which is where I was when I heard a noise behind me. It sounded like something falling into a pile of leaves. I stopped in my tracks. I waited, being as quiet as I could. It's not uncommon for things to fall out of trees, or even to hear a twig snap or a rustling now and again from some animals or whatever. But something about this just struck me. Like, it felt as if there was just something not right about it. I kept looking around, being as still as quiet as I could. I was extremely dark, so I had the feeling that, as unlikely as it was, if it was a person, I couldn't see them, so I was confident they couldn't see me. I waited for a few minutes before I felt comfortable taking another step. There were no other standout noises, so I just chalked it up to my sleep deprivation. I made my way for the trail again. I knew I was almost at the clearing in the woods at the other side, so I wanted to head over to that area. Now, I want to mention here, in about 7 or 8 years of walking at night, not only this trail, but multiple woods and trails nearby my town at this time of night, I have never once ran into another person outside of the town. But as soon as I approached the trail, just before I revealed myself to the night sky, there was a guy walking down the opposite way, like away from the lake towards the camping ground. I stopped and crouched down, just observing him, feeling safe that he hadn't seemed to notice me and I was obscured by 3 layers of trees. He walked calmly and without hesitation, as if he knew this area as well as I did, but as he got closer, I knew I had never seen this man before. His face was gaunt and expressionless. His clothes looked a little rough, but he was dressed pretty smart, like he was wearing a suit that hadn't been taken off for years. He walked right past me, looking nowhere but straight forward. I didn't make a sound. I just watched. Honestly, I was a bit scared, but we were only about 15 minutes from a campsite, so maybe he was staying there and decided to go for a 2 a.m. walk in a battered old suit, alone. It's the only explanation I could think of, to be honest. Whatever the reason, I did not want to come face to face with this random guy I've never seen before at 2 a.m. in the woods. I knew that much. I waited until he was pretty much completely out of sight, and I hastily skipped over to the other side, making sure I held up for a few minutes when I got there to see if he had either noticed me or turned back or anything. He didn't, thankfully, but it still creeped me out. I turned back to the direction of the lake, taking myself through the woods. I was almost at the first clearing. I like to call it the Spider. It's a kind of almost circular shape with small trails leading off its edges in all directions, kind of like legs. I don't know, I just thought it was a cool name. I could see the tree line approaching, and I couldn't wait to get a view of the sky from it. I tried picking up the pace a little, but the woods get quite thick as you get closer, so it's not easy. There was dead silence. The only sound was the crunching of leaves and twigs under my boots. Even the breeze had died. It was actually quite eerie, but in a way, I kind of liked that. I could feel adrenaline beginning to pump through my veins. As I set foot on the soft grass of the Spider clearing, there was now absolutely no sound. No breeze, no leaves or twigs, no animals or critters. Only deafening silence as I took a few more steps in the middle. The moon wasn't in exactly the right spot to shine in and light up the area as it sometimes does, so it was very dark. I could still see to some extent. There was light spilling from the edges, but not much. I could see the tree line all around me, but it wasn't such that I could make out individual trees. I could only recognize it as a dark wall surrounding the clearing. I craned my neck to look directly upwards at the sky. The stars shone so bright, and they seemed to float inside the most beautiful deep blue and purple ocean in the sky, with a smoky cloud-like haze forming behind them, as if it was about to swallow them whole. I could honestly stare at it forever. "Excuse me?" I literally jumped back and let out a gasp of terror as I saw a pale-faced, frail old man standing right in front of me. "Excuse me, sir," he repeated, his high-pitched, shaky voice. I stared at the frail old man, unable to say a word. His crooked face seemed to emanate on its own light, as did his whitish, wrinkled hands. The rest of his body was as dark as the tree line on the other side. It was almost as if it was swallowing any available light that met it. I just stared in disbelief. What was I seeing here? Was I hallucinating? "Excuse me, young man," the old man's shaky voice repeated as he took a step towards me, and I took a step back. Who are you?" I inquired, fear so evident in my tone. "I was hoping you could help me, please," the old man grumbled as he took another wobbly step forward. I took another step back. I'm sorry, mister. I really need to get going," I said as I took yet another step back towards the trees. "Son, I'm lost and cold. I need to find my way back to my wife. Her name is Loretta. Have you seen her? I need to find her. She's out here somewhere." "Look, mister, I haven't seen any Loretta or anybody around here at all. It's 3 a.m. There's nobody back here. We're in the woods." I stopped for a second. "Wait, are you from the camping ground at Oakwood?" "Camping ground?" he replied. "Yes, the camping ground just back there." I turned my head towards the direction of Oakwood. There's a trail. It's only about 15 or 20 minutes walk back. As I turned my head back to face the old man, you would not believe what I saw. I couldn't even believe my own sanity. It couldn't be. It was impossible. As I turned back around, I saw nothing. The old man was gone, like completely gone. Nowhere in the clearing to be seen at all. I must have been hallucinating. It had to be that. There's no other explanation. But I don't feel weird in any way, or sleep deprived, or even tired. Plus, it was so real. There was no way it was a hallucination. But how could that be possible? Nothing like this had ever happened to me before. I was too scared to move. I dropped to my knees as my legs had turned weak in sheer terror. I tried to reason with myself. It had to be my imagination. That or the old man somehow ran into the darkness. But it was only a few seconds that my gaze had left him. There just had to be some kind of explanation. I slowly got back to my feet, looking all around, desperately trying to see something, anything, but I couldn't. I decided maybe I'll stick to the main open trail, stay out of the woods until I get to the lake. And also, the trail gets me there faster. I could see a pale green tint in the sky. The aurora had come tonight, and I didn't want to miss it. As I walked back through the tree line heading for the trail, I had just had a feeling that there were eyes on me from all directions. At some point, I actually thought I could see eyes through the trees. Several eyes. Glowing white, but only for a split second. Some of them I thought I saw were red. That creeped me out, but they were just in my periphery. And when I would turn to check, there was always nothing. I just wanted to get to the trail as fast as possible. I made it pretty quick, aside from stumbling on a few rocks and fallen branches. The trail opened up in front of me, and I was less than 10 minutes from the lake. I picked up the pace. I felt like if I made it there, I could just forget all about the weird stuff and watch the sky, relax, and then take the fastest route back to the car. A very long and brisk 5-minute walk later, I had the lake in my sights. I could see the moonlight bouncing off the surface, shimmering like a beacon of white flame. I broke into a jog and made it there in a minute or two. The breeze had picked up again, and I could hear the rustling of leaves along with the smooth lapping of water against the bank. The aurora was lighting up the sky in a deep shade of purple with a green rim, and the stars were bursting through like a huge city in the sky. I could already feel my troubles slipping away as I slowly walked up to the edge of the water. I bent down to pick up a stone from the soft, damp grass. I skipped it across the surface, leaving ripples trailing behind that distorted all the colors of the night sky in all manner of wonderful patterns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 skips, and the stone was quickly swallowed by the lake. I walked slowly around, letting the surroundings sink into my body and mind. I let out a huge sigh of relief and bent down to pick up another stone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, and gone. I watched the ripples in the water spread out like the lake was opening up into a glistening portal in the sky. I began to walk around the bank, taking in the fresh air, every couple of minutes stopping, feeling the air on my face and just enjoying the calm. About 10 minutes later, I was just about to head back when I noticed something in the water. It was just up ahead, a kind of dark mass. It looked like maybe a suitcase covered in reeds and mud. I found myself getting closer, not letting it out of my sight as it bobbed freely and smooth along the surface nearing the edge. As I got closer, it started to take on a more recognizable form, as I saw at one end of the mass, hair. It was the back of someone's head. A person was floating face down in this freezing lake, their matted black hair tangled with dirt and slimy weeds running all across their back, intertwining. Their clothes seemed like they used to be either a pale yellow or green, but were now dark and mucky, stained with a deep red near the neck. As disrespectful as this might sound, I had to grab the person by the hair to drag them closer. It was as far as I could reach, although it was either that or leave them there. The long, slippery hair was sliding between my fingers as I struggled to grip, but I managed to pull them close enough to get my hands under their arms and drag them onto land. I pulled the body about 10 feet from the water. It wasn't easy. I flipped the poor soul over and discovered a bloated face with peeling skin. There were horrible little creatures crawling from the orifice to orifice and scurrying all over their face and eyes. I studied the body. I saw it was a pale green dress, kind of like some old-school dinner waitress. I almost threw up when I saw the huge, deep, clean wound across their neck. It was bloodless, but the insides of the throat were completely exposed and also cut through. The skull appeared dented, smashed in with some blunt object, and I began to notice stab wounds all over the body, the legs, the stomach, the face, the chest. The chest. I noticed a name tag on the chest. I ran my thumb across the cold metal and revealed the name, Loretta. I jumped up. I felt sick. I felt like I was about to have a panic attack. Loretta. I kept seeing that name tag in my mind's eye. I heard a stone skipping across the lake, and I stopped. I stared as the ripples opened once again, and the stone skipped all the way towards me. I could feel my stomach turn as it skipped right up and jumped out of the water and landed at my feet. There was a lump in my throat as I picked it up and stared intently at it. My heart sank as that familiar feeling of dread consumed me. A whistle echoed from the other side of the lake. The light was much better here, thanks to the unobscured moon, and as I looked up across the lake, there he was, the old man. His chalk-white face was unmistakable, but he was taller, much taller, and he stared at me with his glowing reddish eyes, smiling a toothy grin. He jumped in the water and disappeared beneath the surface. I started shaking in fear. My legs couldn't move. I wanted to bolt as fast as I could, but I was frozen. I heard a soft brush of grass behind me. Before I could turn around, I felt the slick, cold, wet hands wrap around my face, covering my mouth. The smell was unbearable, and it felt like the decomposing flesh was seeping into my mouth as I tried to scream. I was able to turn my head just enough to see Loretta. Her dead eyes stared right through me as if I didn't exist. She made no sound, and her grip tightened around my face. I looked forward to see the old man's head sticking out of the water just 10 feet away. He was staring right at me, smiling, and slowly rising above the water. He pulled himself from the water and gave a very light but menacing laugh. "Excuse me, could you help me find my wife?" he growled as he laughed behind his words like a maniac. I was helpless. I didn't know what was going on or what was going to happen, but I had to try and get out of there any way I could. I fought Loretta's grip, but she was unexpectedly strong. I tried kicking her behind me, but to no avail. Eventually, I let my legs give away completely. I dropped straight down like a dead weight and was able to slip through her watery grasp. As she clamored to grab me again, I was able to roll to one side and jump up as fast as I could. The old guy stopped and just stared as I ran back into the woods. Loretta stared too. Her blackened, puffy eyes seemed to train on my very being with laser precision as her dead gaze pierced my soul. I wasn't slowing down for anything. I ran as fast as I could and never looked back. A fog began to descend on the forest as the air began to change. It became more difficult to see where I was going with every passing second. As I ran, something barged into me, or I barged into something. It was a body, hanging from a tree, swinging violently as I screamed and got back to my feet. I sprinted once again through the trees when I saw more bodies everywhere. I looked swinging from the trees into the fog. I couldn't stop. I had to run through. Some of them made a grab at my hair and my jacket. I was crying now. My legs were getting weaker and I could feel my body giving up. "Help!" I screamed in vain as my legs began to wobble. "Somebody, please help!" I broke through the trees and I collapsed. I was on the trail. The fog was still getting thicker, but I knew I could make it back easier this way. When I saw a shadow slowly emerge through the cloud, I just lay on my front sobbing. My legs had gave up and there was no fight left in me. I knew it was them. I knew I was probably going to die. "Are you okay?" said an unfamiliar voice. I side-glanced over and I couldn't believe my eyes. It was the guy from earlier I had saw walking on the trail. Still in his beautiful old suit, that beautiful, weird guy was back and he was here to save me. I thank all the gods I don't believe in and sobbed even more. "Please, please, help me. I'm being chased. I'm being hunted." "Hunted?" the man said. "Let me help you sit up. Sit over here on this stump and catch your breath. And maybe then we can get back down to Oakwood since you've got your energy back." I couldn't believe my luck. I couldn't believe what had happened, and I was so happy I was safe. I actually felt safe. I sat on an old tree stump, let my legs regain feeling, and let my energy replenish. "What do you mean you're being hunted? And by who? Or by what?" the man asked. "It's a long story. You would never believe me anyway. I'm not even sure if I do." "You're welcome to try me. I will keep an open mind," he reassured me, smiling warmly. "Honestly, I don't even know where to begin," I said as I stretched my leg out to keep it from cramping. I whimpered in pain. "Careful there, buddy. Just let yourself relax. You're obviously very tense, and if you have just went through a traumatic experience, I'll stay here with you. Don't worry, however long it takes." I started to feel a whole lot better, and then he interrupted the quiet once again. "So what actually happened? And I'm confused as to why you wouldn't believe it yourself if it just happened moments ago." "Because it's just so far-fetched. I can't even trust my own mind anymore," I replied, kicking my legs out again, finally able to feel something in them. "Well," he said, putting his hand on the back of my neck. "Sometimes things happen that are so out of this world, most people won't even believe a single word until it's staring them right in the face." He began to growl as I felt his fingers elongate and tighten right around my neck. I turned my head and I was face to face with the most grotesquely evil-looking pale face with glowing deep red eyes of the hottest flame. His hot, arid breath almost choked me. He began laughing maniacally and threw me to the ground and stood up. He was about 8 feet in height and slim. His long pointed fingers danced around like a kid in a sweet shop picking out his favorite candies. His crooked legs began to stomp towards me. The adrenaline burst through my body like a shotgun shell, and I jumped so fast to my feet, and I sprinted like I'd never had before, screaming like a lunatic the whole way, all the time hearing that horrible laughter like it was right by my ear. I almost burst through my car door as I made it back. I fumbled for my keys and jumped in, grabbed my knife, and started the car. The wheels screeched as I took off at a breakneck speed. I couldn't get home fast enough. I skidded the car to a halt in my drive and legged it into the house. I can't even remember if I closed the door. I switched on every light and sat in the middle of my lounge with my knife in my hand, and I waited. I sat in total silence for over an hour. Every little noise, every creak, every noise that wasn't my thumping heartbeat sent a cold shiver down my spine. Only after I had managed to calm down did I feel comfortable moving from my spot. I could finally feel the tiredness begin to take over. It was around 5:30 a.m. Maybe it was safe to go and try and get some sleep. My body ached and I was mentally and physically exhausted. I felt battered and bruised. I left every light on and cautiously walked up to my room. I made sure every window and every door was locked, and I lay in bed, still on edge but feeling so tired. The simple darkness outside my window struck fear into me. I didn't want to look, so I turned away from it. I would probably end up waiting until the sun came up before I could sleep. Although my eyes were really heavy, I couldn't decide if I was too scared or if it was even safe to sleep. As I lay in bed under my cover, my mind raced. My eyes were open and closing, my blinks got longer. Compared to earlier, I did feel a little better, but it didn't take away from the absolutely terror that enveloped my every thought. My eyes were getting really heavy. I knew the time was coming where I would have to give up fighting sleep and just let it take over. Feeling so sleepy, I thought I fell asleep for a minute or two, but I couldn't be sure. It was time for me to drift off. I can't be 100% sure because I was on the threshold of a dream and reality, but I swear this felt as real as everything that had happened earlier. Just before my mind switched off, I heard something inside my room that still haunts me to this very moment. After everything that's happened, and will stay with me for the rest of my life. "Excuse me?" a shaky voice inquired. My eyes shot open. It couldn't have been real. I lay frozen in fear. All I wanted to do was sleep, but I was terrified now. Did I really just hear that? I checked my phone. It was almost 6 a.m. I sighed. It was beginning to get lighter outside at least. It was still pretty dark, but dawn was fast approaching, and my ex-wife would be dropping Julian, my 4-year-old son, off in 2 hours. I take him every Sunday and Tuesday, and every second Saturday. I wish I could see him every day, but such is life, I guess. My ex-wife Linda left a couple of years ago because apparently I had become withdrawn. We barely spoke to each other, and I suppose she was right. I had become withdrawn. I was disappearing a lot more often during my sleepless nights and for longer periods of time. I was never up to anything other than being a loner, but she probably had her suspicions too, so that didn't help. Anyway, I supposed I should just get up. I felt so groggy. I stumbled downstairs again, turning all the lights off and made myself a coffee. It was freezing. The kitchen window was wide open, so I shut it and turned the heating on. I put the TV on and had a quick look at the news headlines. Nothing interesting, so I started channel hopping. I was about halfway through my coffee when my stomach started to turn. The kitchen window. I made triple sure every single door and window was locked before I went upstairs to bed. Mental images of the previous night raced through my head. That skipping stone, that drowned woman, the guy's face. It made me shiver thinking about it. I went back upstairs after my coffee. There was nothing good on TV as usual, so I decided to make sure the spare room was ready for Jules. I changed the bedding and tidied up a bit, since they would be here soon. I had time for a quick shower, and I got myself ready, feeling a little more alive thanks to the coffee and shower. 3 knocks on the door startled me, just as I walked past it. "Hi, son," I said as I swung the door open. Nobody was there. Now I'm freaked out again. I slammed the door shut and instantly 3 knocks rattled the inside of my head. It sounded like a bowling ball falling down from some wooden stairs. I sat with my back to the door. "Please, just stop," I whispered to myself. 3 more knocks. I got to my feet, hesitantly unlatched the handle and slowly opened the door. "Daddy! Hi, Daddy!" My son's sweet little voice was like music to my ears. "Jules, come and give me a hug, wee man," I said, delighted to see his face. Not so delighted to see the dagger look from Linda. What was she mad about? "Come on in," I said to both of them. "Jules, go and get your toy box. Mom and Dad need to talk for a minute." Linda gestured to the lounge where a box of Julian's toys were stored. She led me to the kitchen. "What was that all about, Cameron?" She snarled at me, getting right in my face. "What was what about? What do you mean?" "We were standing, waiting at the door for you, and you open it, then slam it in our faces. What are you on? Julian was frightened. You better not be on any drugs, Cameron, because if you are, this is the last time you will see him, I swear." They were at the door? I couldn't have been more confused. There was definitely nobody there when I opened it. No time to think about it right now. Just say the words and get the angry psycho out of my house. Think about it later. This really messed with my head, though. No, Linda, I'm not on drugs. I haven't slept much at all recently. I was just joking with the door thing, like a prank. But, I guess I look like death warmed up, but that's only because I haven't slept. I'm fine now. I had coffee and a shower, and I'm feeling good. I explained while I gently ushered her back into the hallway. Everything's fine, I promise, I added. I gave Jules a shout to come and say goodbye to his mom, and quickly led her out the front door. When she had left, Jules was still playing with his toys. I joined him in the lounge and I slumped on the couch. Jules looked so happy playing with his cars and trucks. I put Nickelodeon on for him and lay down on the couch. I wasn't paying attention to the TV, only Jules playing, and my eyes were slowly getting heavier. Brum, brum, meow. Crash. Oops, purple car has crashed into monster truck. Get the ambulance. Nina, Nina, Nina. Bless him. Julian continued, Come on, purple car, let's get you go Echo's garage. He'll fix you up. My eyes were getting heavier. I had tunnel vision, and Julian's voice was sounding more like an echo in my hollow head. Oh no, ambulance is stuck. Monster trucks are helping ambulance. Brum, brum. Give me it back. No, give me it back. It's mine. Dad, he's taking my trucks. I sprang up from the couch, panicked. What happened? Jules was visibly upset, but nothing was out of place. The stretchy man tried to take my monster trucks, Julian said, more annoyed than fearful. I could feel the lump in my throat return. I felt sick. I was so tired. Okay, Jules, well, he's gone now, so there's nothing to worry about. It was just your imagination, I said while sitting him up on my knee. I don't think he's gone, Dad, Jules whispered, as we both heard 2 thumps from above us. I immediately ran upstairs, but all was quiet. There was nothing at all. Nothing out of place, no person, or anything else. I checked under every bed, every wardrobe, behind every door. Nothing. I went back down to get Jules. We should go out, grab a ball and some toys, and we can go to the park. Jules jumped up. Yay, the park, he screamed as he grabbed some trucks and a football. We spent a few hours kicking the ball around and just messing about in the park. We got some lunch, just some sandwiches and chips. As we were leaving the cafe, I ran into a friend of my dad's, Big Joe, or some called him Old Joe. Some called him the veteran. I don't even know how old this guy was, but he looked about 100 when I was young. Anyway, the reason I was so glad to see him was that if you ever wanted to know anything about Avermore, past or present, he always knew. He seemed to know everything that had ever happened and all the latest town gossip. Joe, I said, it's been a while. How are you, old-timer? Cammy, son, you're looking good. I've never been better. My God, is that Jules? You were just an ankle biter the last time I saw you, wee man. He ruffled Julian's hair. He shied away behind me, peering at Joe with suspicion. Aye, he's getting big now, starting school next year, I said with a proud look on my face. This is Joe. He was a friend of your grandpa's, I explained to Jules as he continued to hide behind me. Anyway, Joe, I'm actually glad I ran into you. Something happened last night up at Everlocken, something so insane I can't even describe it all right now. But I was wondering if I could bend your ear about it. Maybe tomorrow if you have time? Joe's expression changed. He looked a sight more worried than pleased now. Aye. Okay, Cammy, he stuttered and stumbled over his words. His voice fell to a whisper. Listen, make sure you come around to my house tomorrow, as soon as you drop Jules off, and come alone, as early as possible. Okay, no worries, Joe. I'll be there. I felt a bit freaked out by his response. He had a serious look of worry, and I was eager to find out what he knew. Joe hurried away without another word, so Jules and I started down the street where we were originally going to go see a movie. But there wasn't anything good in the cinema, so instead we went to a shop to look for a DVD to buy. We got popcorn, snacks, and some juice, and we got Toy Story 4 and Pinocchio. Secretly, Pinocchio was partly for me too. It was my favorite Disney movie. Let's have a night in, a couple of movies and some snacks. I smiled at Jules as the shop assistant carefully packed our stuff into bags. She smiled at Jules. Oh, Toy Story 4 is one of my favorites. Have you seen it? Jules shied away behind my legs again. No, you haven't seen it yet, have you, son? I answered on his behalf, smiling back. Well, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. She let out a little laugh at Jules being shy. That'll be €38.80. I handed over €40 and she gave me my change. Thank you very much, she said. Thank you, I replied, smiling. As I turned my head to exit, I caught sight of her name tag. Hello, my name is Loretta, happy to help, it read. My head felt dizzy and I stumbled a step. Are you okay, sir? She asked as she put out an arm to steady me. I'm fine, I replied. It's just... I looked at the name tag again. Hello, my name is Lauren, happy to help. I shook my head and then stared at her for a moment in confusion. It's nothing, I'm sorry, I just felt a bit dizzy. Jules looked at me worried, but I just took his hand and we walked quickly to the car. When I sat inside, I had to think for a few minutes. Did I imagine that? My head was spinning. Flashbacks from the night before were vivid in my mind. When we got home, it was around 4 p.m., so Jules had 3 or 4 hours until bedtime. Just enough time to watch both movies, eat snacks, and get him bathed and ready for bed. Our night in went without incident. Aside from me almost falling asleep multiple times, we had a fantastic night. Just us two. Jules loved the movies and so did I. I got him in his bed and started reading him a Dr. Seuss book. It was What Was I Scared Of? The one about the trousers with nobody inside of them that chases the character around. He was sleeping before I was even halfway through, but I finished anyway. I kind of enjoyed it. My big kid side was showing through tonight. I felt like I would be able to go and sleep pretty easily tonight. I could barely focus on the book. I was that tired. I went downstairs and got some water before returning to my bedroom. I lay in bed, eyes wide open, praying I would be able to sleep tonight. I checked Jules on the little camera and he was out. My eyes once again closing, on the brink of sleep. My body relaxed, and I finally switched off. Then the dreams took over. It felt like I hadn't slept for weeks. I had a weird dream. I had got Jules a Stretch Armstrong toy for his birthday, and it went wild and started wrapping its arms around him hundreds of times, and I couldn't get it off. Eventually, it woke me up, and I was drenched in a cold sweat. I checked my clock, 1:22 a.m. It was actually depressing seeing that. I really felt like I was going to sleep right through the night. I just lay there listening to the wind outside. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to move. No less than a minute later, I heard Julian screaming, a blood-curdling scream. I jolted out of bed and burst into his room. "Dad! Dad, help!" he screeched as he sat upright, crying his eyes out. "The stretchy man said he was taking me away." My body felt weak. I felt absolutely helpless as he sat there, physically shaking. I put my arms around him. "It's okay, son. You can come and sleep in my bed. It was just a nightmare," I said, knowing myself that something more sinister was definitely going on, but not wanting to admit it. "I'm scared, Dad. He's not my friend. I think he's a bad man." I looked at him sobbing and I tried to comfort him. Okay, well, I'm here now, and I won't let him do anything. It was just a bad dream. I carried him to my bed, and I lay awake for several hours while he eventually slept beside me. I was on high alert. Everything had me on edge. I think I slept for another hour maybe when my alarm went off. I had to get Julian ready for the nursery. We had some toast for breakfast. I had a coffee and dropped him off at 7:45. "I love you, son. Have fun today." I gave him a kiss on the head. "Love you too, Dad," he shouted, already turned and run into his class. I had to get to Joe's ASAP. I wasn't sure if it was too early, but I figured I would drive by anyway and see if he was up. He did say as soon as I dropped Jules off, so surely he should be waiting for me. I drove to his house, which was about halfway down a dead-end street, so I drove past it so I could turn around and park facing the way I would be leaving. As I drove past, I saw a large black transit van with the strange red W symbol on the side, parked just outside of Joe's house. When I got to the end of the street, in my rear view, I saw a hooded figure come from Joe's door, jump in the van, and speed off. I parked in the newly vacant space on the street. When I got out, I had a good look around. Something was strange about what had just happened. It didn't sit well with me about the van. I marched up to the front door and rang the bell. No answer. I rang it again. No answer. I tried the handle and the door creaked open. "Joe?" I shouted, hoping he was still alive. I received no reply. I entered the house. The smell was so overpowering it made me feel lightheaded. I felt like I was struggling to breathe and see. It was petrol. Joe's house smelled like a petrol station. "Joe!" I screamed as I darted up the stairs. Joe was sitting in the hallway, soaking wet on a wooden seat with tears in his eyes. "Joe, what is going on?" I demanded. Joe sat and whimpered. "I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry." "Joe, what? Sorry about what? What is all this?" Joe struck a match. "Follow the whispers in the woods. Don't trust anyone, not even the police." He held the match to his neck. "Joe, wait, don't!" I barked at him as his whole body was engulfed in flames in the blink of an eye. The fire snaked and spread onto the floor like it was chasing me down. I fell backwards down the stairs. Luckily, I was able to get myself out, but I badly hurt myself. I was able to make it to my car to phone the emergency services. 7 missed calls. It rang again seconds after I picked it up. "Hello?" "Hi, is that Mr. Murphy?" A worried tone in the woman's voice convinced me this was not going to be good. "Yes, speaking. Who is this?" "This is Carolyn from Avermore Early Years Daycare and Nursery. You better come down right away. Your son Julian is missing. The police are on their way, and so is his mother." I almost choked. It's a phone call nobody ever wants to get, and you never expect it to happen to you. I felt like someone had ripped out every organ in my entire body. I began shaking uncontrollably. "What happened? I mean, what's happening?" I tried to get my words out, but I could barely speak. "Sir, if you could get here right away, please, we will go through the whole protocol with everybody. I'm sure he'll turn up, but we need you both here as soon as possible." I hung up the phone, jumped in my car, and started bombing it down the road back to the nursery. I'd only left him half an hour ago. This didn't make any sense. I didn't even think about Joe's place burning to the ground. Surely someone else would phone it in. But what if they saw me speeding away from the scene? All of these things rattled around in my mind. I couldn't even think straight, but my train of thought was well and truly stopped in its tracks. Just as I approached Julian's nursery, I parked about halfway down the street because I saw something that made my heart stop. Linda's car, 3 police cars, and a large black transit van with a strange red W symbol on the side parked amongst them. Entry 3. A week of no answers. I sat in my parked car and observed the comings and goings of the nursery. There were several police officers milling around, and every now and then Linda would pop out crying. She was inconsolable as offers tried to steady her on her feet and calm her down. I hadn't seen anyone approach the black van yet. I couldn't not go. I had to go in. Otherwise, it might draw some suspicion on me somehow. I waited a few more minutes before I pulled out, making sure nobody saw that I was parked just down the street. I pulled up behind the van and got out, hoping to get a look in the back windows. They were tinted too dark so I couldn't see anything. As I rounded the van, I got a peek inside the cab. Nothing suspicious to note. I stepped inside the nursery. I could already hear Linda sobbing from outside. I took a deep breath and headed for the office. 4 police officers, Linda, and a nursery nurse, and the owner, or head of the nursery, turned to face me. The nursery nurse was also crying. Everyone else was stone-faced as they stared, waiting for me to break the silence. I'm Julian's dad. My voice croaked as I realized how dry my mouth was. Linda ran over and threw her arms around me. "Why did it have to be him?" she sobbed and sniffed as she forced her words out. "It's okay, Linda. We'll find him." I hugged her back in an attempt to comfort her the only way I knew how. "Can somebody please fill me in?" I asked as everybody just stood twiddling their thumbs. The owner of the daycare spoke up. Julian had been talking about a man who kept trying to take his toys and annoy him. He ran from class and hid in a cupboard. He was out of sight for maybe 10 seconds, and when the nurse opened the door, he had vanished. We didn't think he'd go into the cupboard, and instead ran outside where he was snatched. It seems impossible that he could make it that fast, but there's no other explanation. We don't have any witnesses or proof of what happened. To tell you the truth, we don't actually have proof of anything at this time. I turned to the police. "Who's in charge here?" One officer stepped out of the room without a word. I just stood looking confused. "I need some answers here. This is my son." The officer returned with a tall, bulky detective in an expensive suit. "You're looking for the officer in charge? That would be me, Detective Chief Superintendent Williams." "Williams? Is that your van parked outside?" I asked, feeling sure he wouldn't have seen me at the veteran's house, so I wanted to see if it would slip him up. "My van?" He looked confused. "Yes, the black transit van outside. Whose is it?" My voice was getting noticeably louder. "I have no idea," said Williams. "Let me check that out for you." I followed him outside, and just before we reached the exit, I had a feeling in my gut that I knew exactly what was going to happen. I wasn't even shocked to see the van was gone, and everyone just looked at me like I was crazy. "It must have been someone else's van," I muttered. My car was still parked in the same place, right behind where the van once stood. I just couldn't wrap my head around all these bizarre things that kept happening. And honestly, I didn't have time to think. We had to find Jules. DCS Williams spoke up. "So, if yourself and the boy's mother could accompany us to the station, we need statements, and we need statements from the nursery staff." "Absolutely, no problem," I replied. As I was walking away, I overheard Carolyn, the head of the nursery, tell Williams that she had someone park the van one street over. I knew it. I knew something wasn't right with him. This whole situation reeked, and I was going to get to the bottom of it one way or another. The blue lights all flashed on in unison, and the police convoy set off. Then Linda's car, then myself with 2 cars behind me. I could still see Williams and Carolyn talking in my rear view, glancing over to me as we drove away. We drove straight to the station. Once inside, they were taken separately and asked to give a statement. When we last saw Julian, what his mood was like, what he was wearing, and did he have many friends? One question caught me off guard, though. It wasn't unusual. I can imagine it's one of the most typical standard questions in this situation. Where were you between 7:45 and 8:15 this morning? Now, of course they should ask anyone and everyone this, but I was at the veteran's house. I didn't want to say I was there because then that might open a whole nother line of questioning. Plus the fact I saw the van there, which was possibly driven by Williams. If he found out I knew he was at the scene, I might be in for a rough time. On the other hand, what if someone saw me fleeing the scene right after the house caught fire? Or worse, what if Williams saw me? I had already hesitated long enough. It was a simple question. It was less than 2 hours ago, and I was making myself look somewhat suspicious by taking so long to answer. Sorry, my mind is a million miles away, I mumbled, buying myself time. Let me think. I dropped Jules off. Then I headed to see one of my dad's old friends, Big Joe McKenzie. You might know him as the veteran? I made sure I didn't speak of him in past tense. Of course we know Joe. How long were you there for? The detective queried. Oh, seconds. I knocked on the door twice and he never answered, so I just left and started heading home. Then I got the call about Jules and went straight to the nursery, I explained, almost convincing myself. Okay, was there anyone else there? This struck me as odd. Maybe it was another routine question, but now I'm wondering what they know. Why would they ask that when I'm just visiting a friend and I said I just knocked on the door and left? It didn't add up in my mind. No, I never saw anyone. The two detectives glanced at each other for a second, then the other asked, The nursery said they called you 7 or 8 times before getting through. Why is that? I'm not sure. I was probably driving and I didn't hear my phone. It's usually on silent. I only noticed the missed calls when I was checking the time. Then it rang in my hand as I looked. That's when I answered. They both took some notes, then continued asking more questions. I was then asked to sign a statement containing all of the information I had just shared with them, and we were done. Thank you for your full cooperation, Mr. Murphy. Our investigation has already went beyond the first few steps, so hopefully we will be able to find Julian soon. The next 48 hours are crucial, so I can assure you we will be working round the clock to get him home safe. Thank you. Please find him. Please. I pleaded as I shook their hands. We will do everything we can. They turned and led me back to the lobby where Linda was waiting, still red-eyed and crying her heart out. We waited for everyone else to come out from giving their statements, then we all went back to the nursery to try and organize some kind of search party. I was suspicious of DCS Williams, and now Carolyn, but I felt like I couldn't tell anyone. Like it would backfire and everyone would think I'm insane and not believe me. I could see how everyone, especially Linda, had their full trust in those two people, and I would need some kind of evidence, something concrete to back up my theory before I go blurting out accusations. But for now, I would play along and try to find my son. After the first crucial 48 hours, we still hadn't heard a word from the police. We had search parties day and night looking everywhere for any signs. Linda would join the search in the day, but I was able to join both since I only slept about 2 or 3 hours a day anyway. I was out pretty much constantly looking for him. The fact that we hadn't had a single update worried me. I felt like they weren't bothering to even search for him. I thought they would have patrols out, police-guided searches, sniffer dogs, helicopters. There was none of that. It was like they had just forgotten. I eventually contacted them only to be told they were doing all they could and it was under investigation. After the 3rd day, I was contacting them every hour or two, round the clock. There had to be some kind of update surely, but every time I contacted, it was the same story. What was weird was that there had been absolutely no report on Joe's house, or anything about Joe. Not a word by anyone, not in the local paper. It was like that had just been completely overlooked. I mean, I wasn't really complaining. I didn't want to find myself answering questions about it, but I just thought it was a bit odd that nobody had even mentioned it. On days 5 and 6, the search parties had gotten smaller in number and shorter. People were giving up so easily it kind of hurt. I think they must have thought if a 4-year-old was out there alone in the winter for 5 or 6 days, the search would be either for a body or a kidnapper, and nobody wanted to be confronted by either of those things. There was a select few family and friends still searching relentlessly, but we always came up empty-handed. It crushed me every time a search had to be stopped because of the weather or some other reason. All I could think of was finding my poor boy. While we all go home, and sit in front of our fire. A week after, no answers and constantly calling the station 20, 30 times a day at most, DCS Williams showed up at my door. It was 11 p.m. and he was alone. Hi, is everything okay? I wasn't expecting anyone tonight, I said as he stood on my porch wet from the rain. Good evening, Mr. Murphy. I just wanted to stop by, unofficially, to see how you were getting on, he declared in his comforting baritone voice. Well, I suppose I'm holding up okay, considering I'm actually just getting ready for another search. May I come in, Cameron? He interrupted. Is it okay if I call you Cameron? He said, placing one foot over the threshold. I suppose. I don't really care, I mumbled as he pushed his way inside. He walked straight into my lounge and sat down, making himself at home as if I had already told him to do so. I followed shortly after, still a bit wary about this whole thing. Please sit, he gestured to the armchair sitting on the left of the couch. So, what's this all about? I asked. What, no cup of tea? You don't have guests around, do you? He stared directly in my eyes, and I felt intimidated. He was a big guy. Well, I don't have any tea bags, sorry. I felt like I was already walking on eggshells, like this could go south at any second. He continued to stare menacingly. Not to worry. Relax, kid. So, do you have absolutely no idea why I'm here? He began pulling some folded up papers from his long coat. No, I've got no idea, sorry, I said, trying to catch a glimpse of the papers he held in his hand. Well, he looked and flicked through at a couple of the sheets. You told one of my detectives that you attended the dwelling of a Mr. Joe McKenzie on the morning Jillian went missing. He looked up from the paper with an over-exaggerated friendly grin. I did, yes, I replied. Okay. He looked back, smiling at the papers as he ruffled in his hands. Okay, thank you. So can you tell me why you failed to mention anything about Joe's house burning to the ground? Immediately, I felt like I was under attack, but I couldn't let it show. I didn't hear anything about that. It wasn't on fire when I got there. I stumbled over my words. Okay, so you had already left the area before the fire started? He looked at me with unconvincing reassurance. Relax, Cameron. You're not under arrest or anything. You're getting a bit fidgety. I just don't want you to think I had anything to do with it, I said, reaching for a cigarette. And why would I think that, Cameron? You got there, knocked on the door, nobody answered, and you left. Simple as that. You saw nothing else at all, is that correct? He was now staring at me so intently I struggled to look back. No, I saw nothing at all. I must have looked visibly shaken by now. Good, he said, returning to the reassuring, friendly smile he must have used a million times. I saw right through it. Well, I best be off. Don't want you to be late for your search party. He stood up and hastily walked to the front door. I followed closely, feeling relieved. Then he turned just as the door opened and whispered in my ear, By the way, whatever that old man told you, you keep your mouth shut, or I'll have you locked up so fast you'll get whiplash. Then he giggled loud and spoke in an obnoxiously loud voice as he walked to his car. Well, thanks for the tea, Cammy. I wish you the best in your search tonight. You ever need anything, you give me a call straight away. He smiled again and got into his car. I was scared, I'll be honest, but I was also in a rage. I knew he was there. He knows what happened, and he knows that I know he was there. He came here to shut me up, to make sure I wasn't going to say anything. This whole tragedy, the fire, the veteran's death, it's all been covered up because he knows I saw him there. Although why he was worried about what Joe told me, I didn't know. There were so many questions, but right now I was unable to even think about any of that because I was staring at my table and the pile of papers DCS Williams had left behind. I didn't know if I should look or... In fact, I knew immediately there was no point in having any kind of internal debate on whether or not to look. As soon as I saw them, I knew I was looking. I picked them up. They were printouts of pictures taken the morning Julian went missing. They showed me arriving at Joe's, me at Joe's door, me entering Joe's house, and then me running from Joe's house while the upstairs window had a dim orange glow that wasn't present in the others. Me driving away, another of me driving away, and Joe's house in a fierce blaze top to bottom. So obviously this did not look good. Considering I had already lied to the police about my whereabouts, it made it look even more suspicious. He then left these here on purpose to show me what he had on me, and he had me completely under his thumb, and it would take a miracle for me to get out. If anything, this made me take Joe's final words more seriously. I couldn't trust anyone, and I would have to do some digging for information about the woods or find out what was going on. And what did he mean by the whispers? I knew of only one other person I felt like I could properly trust, my friend Archie, who I grew up with. All through school and our childhood we had been best friends, although the past 8 years or so I've only spoke with him a handful of times. If I was taking my shot and telling someone everything, then it was going to be him. I just hoped they hadn't gotten to him first. When I met Archie the following morning, he looked depressed. He looked malnourished and at the end of his rope. The reason we never spoke much for all these years wasn't through lack of trying. Archie just became a bit of a hermit, for lack of a better word. About 8 years ago, he was married to one of his longtime friends, Michelle. They were each other's first loves and got married at 19. About 5 years later, she fell pregnant, and when Michelle was giving birth, she had to be put under anesthesia, and she swore she heard the baby cry when it was born. The doctors said that she had a stillborn, and she might have been hallucinating. They wouldn't even let Archie in the ward. They said it would be too distressing. She killed herself about 8 months later. Archie found her hanging in the garage. The death of the baby was bad enough, but they wouldn't release the body. Apparently it was some protocol that it was taken to a tiny coffin and buried in a small cemetery nearby the hospital, under a memorial stone with the inscription, "Ben, born asleep." The nurses let them name the baby before he was laid to rest. Neither of them got to hold their firstborn. Then, still grieving, he finds his beloved wife hanging from a rope. He just collapsed on himself and became reclusive. I didn't even know how long it had been since he last ate or even seen anyone. "Archie?" I spoke softly as he sat in his porch staring at the ground. He didn't respond. "Archie, it's me, Cameron." I took a few steps toward him and sat on the ground in his line of sight. "How are you? I've missed you, man." I extended a hand and his eyes met mine. "Cammy? How are you? It's been ages." His hand came forth and shook mine. "I'm okay, Archie. I don't know if you heard or not, but Julian, he's gone missing." He sat silent for a few seconds. "Missing? What? How? Where? What happened?" He began to come to life. "It's a bit of a long story, man. We should go inside. I don't want anyone to know I'm here." I got up and opened the front door. The house stank, and it was an absolute mess. We both entered, and I sat in a chair. Archie sat on the couch opposite me. I told him absolutely everything, from the woods and Avi Loken, to Julian disappearing, to Williams threatening me the night before. Archie stared dumbfounded, but he didn't seem as surprised as I expected with some of the details. "Williams, man, I knew there was something crooked about him," he snarled as he looked off to the side thinking. I knew something wasn't right. The whole thing with the van is just completely off." I replied, shaking my head. We sat in silence for a few moments. I need to tell you something, Cammy. He rose from his battered old couch and walked over to his fireplace. He took something down. His house was dark, but I could make out it was some sort of doll. He threw it over to me. I looked at it. It was muddy and rotten. I felt confused. What is this? Was this a toy you bought for Ben or something? No, Cammy. That is Ben. He spoke with aggression. After Michelle's suicide, I went haywire. I started taking all sorts of drugs and drinking. I went to that cemetery and dug up Ben's grave. I don't know what I was thinking or what I planned on doing, but inside his tiny little coffin, Cammy, there was this doll. He grabbed it and threw it into the unit log fire. He continued, and I got arrested, and guess who let me off with it? That Williams. He assured me I wouldn't go to prison if I just kept my mouth shut. Fed me some crap about the hospital using stillborn babies for some kind of research. All above board and government approved, blah blah blah. I stared at Archie, not believing my ears. He manipulated me into keeping silent and acted like he was my friend. If he's behind this somehow, I'll kill him myself. He was shouting now as he paced up and down the room. When I saw Archie in this fit of rage and anger, hearing those words, an ever so slight smile crept onto my face. Listen, Archie, me and you, we're gonna sort all of this out, I exclaimed, as I just realized that I had found my guy. Hey friends, thanks so much for listening to another episode of Horror Time Storytime. As you might have noticed, the story is not yet complete. My next upload will continue the story, so be prepared for a part 2 soon. Also, I've tried some new background music in this video. Comment below what you think of it, or if you like the old music better. Any feedback will help me out greatly, and I really appreciate it. If you have a story you would like me to read, fiction or nonfiction, please send those over to me at reisnernails@outlook.com, and I'll get them added to the next video. If you haven't already, consider hitting that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I put up new videos. Thanks again, guys, and I hope you have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.